The courtroom was cold, not just from the polished marble floors or the humming vents overhead, but from the silence that greeted Liam Prescott as he walked toward the defendant's bench. All eyes turned, some curious, some skeptical, a few plainly hostile. He wore a navy suit too big for his slender frame. It sagged at the shoulders, clearly borrowed, and hung loose at the sleeves. The rainbow pin on his lapel, small and quiet, stood in contrast to the bold stares that followed him. Liam was 19, pale-skinned, sharp-eyed, a foster child who had aged out of the system with more books than friends. He had grown up learning how to fade into the background until the day he was accused of destruction. Destruction of property? That was the formal charge. The event had been a charity performance hosted at an elite arts center, a place he once volunteered at, stacking chairs and adjusting microphones. Always careful, always precise. The night ended in chaos when a lighting rig fell mid-performance, injuring no one but rattling donors. The next morning, Liam's name was on every internal report. No explanation, no defense. Now, here he was, alone. The courtroom murmured when he told the judge he would represent himself. There was no lawyer by his side, no family in the gallery, just Liam and the man who had once shaken his world apart. Lucas Granger, the prosecutor, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, known for his no-nonsense attitude and infamous rigidity toward misguided youth. His reputation preceded him, a former military legal officer turned prosecutor, with decades of conservative rulings under his belt. Lucas stared at Liam over his reading glasses, like a professor tired of explaining the rules. Then, in a voice loud enough to echo through the gallery, he spoke. "Mr. Prescott, I sincerely hope you're not planning to replace the law with emotion today. This isn't a stage for personal narratives." The gallery laughed quietly. Liam didn't blink. Instead, he turned to the jury, hands at his sides, spine straight despite the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on him. And then he said the words that silenced the whispers in a breath. "I'm not here to defend just myself. I'm here to expose why this court only sees the surface." That single sentence stopped even Lucas Granger in his tracks. Because what no one in the room knew, not the jury, not the judge, not even the reporters scribbling headlines, was that this boy, standing in his oversized suit, had once loved Lucas Granger's only son, and Lucas Granger had never known. This case wasn't just about property damage. It was about shame and silence and the weight of truths hidden too long. For Liam, it wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about holding a mirror up to the system that erased boys like him quietly, thoroughly, without hesitation. And he was done being quiet. If this story made you pause, stay with us. Liam's fight has only just begun. This is Heart's story, where love, justice, and truth speak louder than fear. Subscribe to hear the voices the world tried to silence. The prosecution opened with photos, grainy snapshots from the night of the event, a shattered spotlight, a bent metal frame, people pointing, rushing, confused. Lucas Granger, with rehearsed confidence, narrated them as if every image proved Liam's guilt. He claimed Liam had interfered with equipment backstage just moments before the lighting collapsed, that his behavior was suspicious and unauthorized. He spoke with the weight of authority, making each sentence sound final. But when it was Liam's turn, he didn't start with a denial. He started with facts. The rig had been flickering since early that day. The maintenance log which Liam had obtained showed 3 unresolved warnings about its instability. And Liam, he had filed a report, an email, time-stamped hours before the incident, sent directly to the event director. He showed it to the court, and then he looked straight at the jury. "I didn't destroy anything," he said calmly. "I tried to fix what others ignored." Still, suspicion lingered. Motive was everything. Why would a volunteer interfere with technical equipment without permission? That's when Liam introduced a name the courtroom had not yet heard. Dylan Granger. There was a shift in the air. Lucas flinched, not visibly, but enough for those paying attention to notice. Liam continued. "He was my boyfriend," he said softly, "until your system made it impossible for us to exist in the same space." Whispers spread like wildfire. All eyes darted between Liam and Lucas. Then a door opened at the back of the courtroom, and Dylan Granger walked in. He was older now, taller, sharper jaw, dark hair pushed back in a way that made him look more like his father than ever. Except for his eyes didn't carry contempt. They carried hurt. He took the witness stand. Liam asked the questions himself. His voice didn't shake. "Dylan, were you present at the charity event the night of the incident?" "Yes," Dylan replied. "Did you see me damage any equipment?" "No." Or, "What happened before the lights fell?" Dylan looked across the room, directly at his father. Then, slowly, he turned back. "You tried to warn someone. I saw it. You were escorted away after speaking to the manager. I thought they were taking you seriously. But the manager knew about us, and he didn't want you there." The courtroom froze. Even the judge didn't interrupt. Dylan wasn't done. He made it clear. He said it wasn't a safe image to have two boys like us backstage. He told Liam to leave, or they'd find a reason to remove him anyway. An hour later, the rig fell. Lucas Granger's jaw clenched. His knuckles turned white where they gripped the edge of the prosecution desk. He had not moved since his son had walked in. His silence was deafening. Liam stepped back, hands steady, and nodded. He had done what he came to do. He had held up the truth and put it in the mouth of the one person Lucas could never cross-examine, his own son. For the first time, Lucas Granger looked at Dylan not as a legal inconvenience, but as someone he didn't recognize at all. Not because he had changed, but because Lucas had never really seen him. The room did not recover from Dylan's testimony, not even when Lucas Granger stood up, face tight, voice louder than necessary, demanding that the entire exchange be stricken from the record. He called it a conflict of interest. He called it irrelevant to the case. He called it personal bias parading as legal evidence. But the judge didn't budge. She looked at Lucas with the calm of someone who had seen men in power panic before. She ruled firmly the testimony would stand. Dylan's statement had revealed not just a personal history, but a pattern of targeted exclusion, one that the court had a duty to acknowledge. Lucas sat down, but something had cracked. Not in the case, but in him. Liam stepped forward again. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't act triumphant. He simply continued, like someone who had waited years to be allowed to finish a sentence. He called his next witness, a classmate, a boy named Jamal. Tall, with soft eyes and a nervous smile, Jamal stepped up with hesitation. Liam stood beside him, not as a lawyer, but as someone who had once offered him safety in a hallway full of stairs. Jamal recounted the day he was expelled from a school-sponsored event for wearing a satin blouse one that had belonged to his sister. He said no one listened when he tried to explain that it wasn't a costume. It was who he was. And Liam was the only one who stood up. Then came another voice, a girl named Renee, who had seen Liam stand between a group of boys and a younger student who had been cornered outside the library for acting too feminine again and again. The courtroom heard versions of the same truth. Liam Prescott had never been the destroyer. He had been the one trying to hold things together while everyone else tried to pretend they saw nothing. Lucas shifted in his seat. With each witness, his power eroded, and then, as if unable to hold it in, he snapped. He rose abruptly, cutting into the testimony, and addressed Liam with words dipped in frustration. "So what is this? Then a crusade for the misunderstood? Or are you just doing all this because you love my son?" The room tensed. Everyone looked at Liam, but he didn't flinch. He looked straight at Lucas, not with anger, not with fear, but with something quieter, clearer, conviction. "I love Dylan," he said, "but I'm not standing here to keep a boyfriend. I'm standing here to defend the truth that your version of justice forgot." The gallery was silent. The prosecutor had used every rule in the book to reduce Liam's presence to emotion, to discredit every word by tying it to personal history. But Liam didn't need to hide his love to prove his point. In fact, that love was the point. It had been denied, erased, pushed into corners by people like Lucas, who now found himself on the wrong end of a truth he never saw coming. The shame wasn't in Dylan's silence. The shame wasn't in Liam's defense. The shame was in power that refused to see. And today, that power was being seen for what it truly was. Dylan didn't wait for the trial to end. After his testimony, he stepped down from the witness stand with a grace that came not from confidence, but from release. He had said what he needed to say. There was nothing left to defend. Not his past, not his father, not even himself. He walked slowly toward the exit, the same courtroom door he had entered with such hesitation. But just before he reached it, he paused. His hand reached into his backpack, and then he turned, not to look at his father, but to face the judge. With careful steps, Dylan walked forward again, his fingers wrapped around something small and creased, a folded paper, slightly worn at the corners, like it had been carried too long without a home. He handed it to the bailiff. "It's a letter," he said quietly, "written over a year ago, from Liam. It was never sent. I kept it." The judge nodded. The courtroom watched as she opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the inked lines with growing stillness. And then, at her signal, the clerk stood and read it aloud. The voice was neutral, but the words weren't. "Dear Dylan, by the time you read this, I probably won't be around much. Not in the same places, not in your orbit, not where it would hurt you to look. That's the point, I guess. I left not because I stopped loving you, but because I couldn't bear to be the reason you lost him. I knew it the moment we sat in your living room and he refused to look at me. The silence was louder than anything he could have said. He didn't hate me because I was rude or reckless. He hated me because I was yours, and you were his son." The air shifted, not with shock, but with something older. Recognition. The letter continued, "If he has to choose between loving me and losing his father, then let him keep his father. I can take the silence." A woman in the gallery wiped a tear. Another leaned forward and pressed her hand over her mouth. Lucas didn't move. His face didn't twitch. But his eyes, sharp, blue, unyielding, glossed over as if something behind them cracked quietly. The courtroom didn't breathe. For the first time, Liam did not need to speak. His heart had already done it, in handwriting no one was supposed to see. He hadn't written that letter for court. He had written it for peace. But now, under fluorescent lights and legal scrutiny, it served as something else, a mirror, not to prove innocence, but to reveal sacrifice, to show the cost of silence and the burden of loving someone is secret, to let the world hear the ache that power never accounted for. The judge folded the letter slowly. Lucas lowered his gaze. Even now, he said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Dylan didn't wait for permission. He walked out of the courtroom without a word, without looking back. He had reclaimed his voice and left his father to sit in the echo of everything he'd chosen not to hear. The verdict didn't take long. The jury filed in with faces unreadable, their steps steady, their silence louder than the reporters whispering at the back. Liam sat alone, hands clasped together in his lap, posture calm, eyes focused forward. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Liam Prescott, not guilty on all charges." A pause, then a murmur, then applause. The judge raised her hand, calling for order, but even she didn't seem surprised by the reaction. It wasn't just a ruling, it was a reckoning. Liam exhaled, not in relief but in quiet acknowledgement. He had walked into this courtroom accused, dismissed, disrespected. He walked out, not just cleared but seen. Outside, reporters gathered, microphones extended, cameras rolled. Everyone wanted a quote, a reaction, a headline, but Liam didn't perform. He answered briefly, politely, and then he walked away from the noise. Lucas Granger caught up with him on the courthouse steps. Not with cameras, not with staff, just a man, exposed in a way he had never known before. His voice was low. "I was wrong," he said. "I failed my son. I failed you, and I'm sorry." Liam looked at him for a long moment, but his words didn't go where sympathy lived. He simply said, "You don't need to apologize to me. You need to apologize to your son, the one who had to learn to love in the dark." And with that, he turned. He didn't linger for thanks. He didn't wait to see if Lucas would cry again. He didn't need closure from a man who had built his reputation on silence. What came next was not about redemption. It was about restoration. In the weeks that followed, news of the trial spread across the country. Commentators debated it. Communities shared it. Students reposted clips of the moment Liam spoke of justice. But one headline quietly reshaped everything. Dylan Granger changes name, launches foundation for LGBTQ youth. It was not a media stunt, not an act of rebellion. It was the start of something real. Dylan renounced the Granger name and adopted his mother's surname. More than that, he opened a shelter and legal aid center for teenagers rejected by their families. It bore no bitterness, no revenge, just a mission built from the silence he once endured. Liam was never quoted in the opening ceremony, but those who attended swore they saw him, standing quietly in the back. No speech, no cameras, just a presence. Because sometimes surviving isn't loud. It's steady, dignified, unapologetic. And when Liam left the courthouse that day, he didn't walk out as a victim who'd won. He walked out as proof. Proof that being seen for who you are is more powerful than any accusation. That telling your truth can shake a system built to ignore it. And that love, even unreturned or silenced, can leave behind the kind of light that others follow home. Have you ever had to choose between being true to yourself and keeping someone else's approval? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be what someone out there needs to hear. This is Heart Story, where silence ends and stories begin. Subscribe now to follow more powerful journeys like Liam's.